Good morning, everyone. My name is Aline Martins. I'm a global business and partnerships lead at Connected Places Catapult. And this workshop will be part of a knowledge sharing program of the Unlocking the Value Chain of VVs and Micromobility in India. It's a project that is being delivered by Connected Places Catapult in collaboration with Global Business and Roads, our local India partner, and funded by Innovate UK. This will be an interactive session that focuses on enhancing business models and value propositions to align with the needs of electric two-wheeler and three-wheeler operators. So participants will be introduced to tools and frameworks that will help them to explore innovation in business models, and we review business models and value proposition canvases with a focus on the electrical vehicle market. So key topics that we're going to cover today: exploring successful business models in the EV market, understanding business models and value propositions with emphasis on customer value and margin creation, and developing value propositions tailored to SMEs in the electric vehicle space. Through group discussions, peer reviews, and collaborative problem solving, participants will identify challenges and develop actionable insights to create compelling and competitive business models for the electric two-wheeler and three-wheeler sectors. You will hear from our business model and market appraisal team, and have a facilitated working session on business model development. Just to remind you, this webinar will be recorded and will be available to view on demand. You will set a link to this alongside the slides. Any questions, please put them in the QA box. Like I said, we plan to have this as an interactive session where you can ask questions live. But if you could please keep your mics muted during the presentations, it will be very, very helpful. And feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Next slide, please. Okay, so just very briefly, the previous slide, sorry. Just very quickly, the agenda. We are going to start with the workshop objectives. Then we're going to provide an overview of business models innovations in the EV market. We're going to move to customer landscape and key challenges. We're going to talk about what we mean by value propositions and business models. We're going to have a little session to discuss on challenges, and we're going to have a working session with the value proposition canvas. So I hope everyone enjoys it. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Neil Merry, our business analyst.
Thanks, Aline. Hi and welcome everyone. So my name is Neil Merry. I'm a business analyst at Connected Places Catapult, and I'll be presenting for roughly the next 20 minutes. So yeah, the starting point for this workshop was a Connected Places Catapult project called Unlocking the EV Value Chain for SMEs in India, but we thought it useful to open up the workshop to SMEs in both India and the UK. You've already seen the agenda, along with presenting some examples and key challenges of business model innovation in this market. The main objective of this workshop is to get you thinking about your own value proposition and target customers, to introduce tools for quick development of business model ideas. And we want to be able to sort of share our thoughts and approaches in group discussions so we can learn from one another as well. Sorry, next slide, please. So yeah, I've just covered that. Next slide, please. So a little bit on business model innovation, particularly highlighting some of the trends and successes in EV mobility. Next slide, please. So what is business model innovation? This was the most succinct example I could find. So an innovative business model is when a company enhances its competitive advantage and provides value to customers by changing the value proposition and operational strategy. The aim is to deliver greater value whilst driving profitability and revenue. So changes to value proposition, the change can include who the company is targeting, the product or service they offer, and the revenue model they follow. And changes to operational strategy can include the focus here is to increase profitability and competitive advantage. So to innovate is necessary to change from the status quo, identify the competitive advantage, and ultimately create value to the customer and to the business. Next slide, please. So shown here are some examples of well-known companies in electric vehicle or shared mobility market. Each demonstrates a business model innovation that utilizes advances in technology to create an operational advantage or a unique value proposition. So on the left, you have City Bikes in New York and the equivalent London-based TfL bikes that achieved innovation through Adopt Cycle Hire, which is a simple technology change, but first of its kind when it was launched, which made cycle hire more convenient and provided a visible and attractive alternative to tube or bus journeys. Clearly now this model has been disrupted by dockless systems such as Lime, which use IoT trackers, Internet of Things trackers, that allow the user to go further without the restriction of locating a dock to store the bike. And then next you have Uber. They have innovated through the advent of personal mobile devices and peer-to-peer services, which allowed it to manage a large fleet of drivers in multiple locations without actually owning a single taxi. Thus, they created the gig economy for drivers. Furthermore, it helped create trust across both the drivers and the passengers through an in-apps rating system where users can rate their experience. And lastly, we have Tesla. They innovated by creating an aspirational brand in a largely, certainly at the time, untapped market of the electric vehicles. It overcame infrastructure and operational barriers by developing a network of superchargers. It also shared IP and partnered with potential competitors such as Toyota and Mercedes to expand its coverage and network. Business model innovations, they do not exist in isolation and often go hand in hand with the growth of new technologies. That means you need to be at the right time and place. Business models can fail if the technology isn't mature enough or if the customer doesn't understand the benefit being offered to them. Next slide, please. So here we have a graphic that's been adapted from a presentation by a design and innovation agency called Plan. The chart shows the current landscape of personal mobility that can be described according to either cost and convenience or journey length. Can you click forward one? Thank you. So alongside traditional transport modes, the rise of digital services and personal mobile devices have allowed innovative business models to emerge across personal mobility. These include things like free floating car sharing, such as Drive Now, micro car sharing, such as Audi Unite program, and peer-to-peer car sharing, and dynamic minibus, such as Bridge. So along with a range of parallel digital services, such as journey planners, payment and parking services. So each new business model offers an innovative alternative to personal car ownership, either with potential economic or environmental benefits. However, few of these business models have caught on at any scale. Whilst these new solutions are technically innovative and offer new business model approaches, many can fail to offer an attractive enough alternative to existing solutions on the market. In other words, the value proposition often isn't strong enough. Next slide, please. Only the rise of e-bikes and hailable minicab services such as Uber have gained significant traction as a long-lasting alternative to traditional transport options. But this is only to date, things can still change. Next slide, please. Furthermore, Uber, which has currently 118 million active users across 72 countries and 10,000 cities, has only recently, in the last few years, made a profit. Click forward, please. It's done so by diversifying its offering into grocery and food delivery and also offering freight services. And it does this by leveraging existing platform architecture and operators. This has obviously allowed it to increase its prices and onboard more riders. However, this has only been possible on the back of significant investment and spending. The investment has allowed it to scale across different cities and countries and to capture its market share. And from this position of strength, it can then diversify and grow its profit margins. Whilst Uber's business model has been innovative and disruptive, it has required many millions of pounds or dollars of investment, fighting of challenges from local authorities and an embedding of new operational models over several years to realize this profit. And it just kind of shows to show that innovation is never straightforward or easy. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for SMEs and micro-mobility? Micro-mobility can be a crowded market and differentiation can be a challenge, either through the services offered or through the business model that the SME is operating. So like Uber, only recently have shared mobility services realized any sustained profit. However, they are now starting to do so. Lime, for instance, has done this by developing its own more reliable vehicle and expanding across different markets. Swing has focused on the favorable market of South Korea, where there are no regulatory limits on fleet sizes. Voi has invested in reducing its cost base, and Tier and Dot have merged to become Tier Dot to strengthen their the market opportunity and penetration. Some common elements across all these profitable operators include the following. So loyalty. Lime has innovated in this space. It's used gamification. It includes gamification and kind of nudges in its app. So rewarding you for achieving certain milestones. It also has referrals where you can refer other users and get a sort of a reward for doing so. And it has its juicer program, which pays people to recharge the Lime bikes and Lime scooters, and kind of crowdsources this recharging service by kind of giving a sort of a financial return. And then there's some favorable markets. So markets where subsidies or regulation is helpful. And obviously we must consider culture in this. So Dutch and Nordics regions already have a strong cycling and culture anyway. And also safety. So the cities in which these micro-mobilities operate need to be safe and generally free from pollution. It's got to be a comfortable environment to have micro-mobility services. And then vehicles that last. This is very important because if the vehicles don't last, it's going to cost you a lot of money in terms of either replacing the vehicles or maintaining the vehicles. So that affects your kind of cost for ownership. And finally, click forward, please. It's the user experience. Obviously, this is linked to loyalty, but providing a better experience in your competitors will keep customers coming back. User experience can also relieve anxieties around range or battery life. Click, please. Ultimately, in a competitive market, success mostly comes from either being better or cheaper than the alternatives. Click, please. So the important thing here is to focus your solution. In the early stages of business growth, it's necessary to have this focus. You need to understand your market, identify your core customers and your unique value proposition. Your chosen revenue model, click forward, please. Your chosen revenue model should match your target customer profile and your costs, whether you're targeting a large number of occasional customers or a small number of long-term loyal customers. You need to choose a revenue model that suits your business strategy. Pricing can be either cost-based, competitor-based, or value-based. Cost-based is simplest. Value-based pricing takes a bit longer and requires more evidence to determine the value you're presenting to your target customers. And the more assets you own or manage, the higher operational costs. So that needs to be factored into your revenue model as well, particularly in the rental market. Click forward, please. So in summary, first we need to be clear about which markets you're targeting, who your customers are, and then you align your business model and your unique value proposition. And then from this, you can identify a competitive advantage that creates extra value for your customers, reduces your cost, or increases your profit. Next, please. So now I'm going to move on to talk a little bit about stakeholders and the customer landscape. So how does this all fit with your own business? I've had to keep this topic broad because this is an open workshop. We're not sure who's going to be attending, but essentially it comes down to who you're targeting and where do you fit in the value chain. So next slide, please. So your business model doesn't sit in isolation. It is dependent on a value chain. So innovations in battery performance or cost can unlock value further down the chain, both either for the vehicle OEMs or the operator, as well as the battery manufacturer itself. So by considering the value chain in your business model, you can solve problems and identify opportunities for value. Forward, please. So for instance, as an operator, you could choose to target food retailers as your target customer. And by doing this, you can increase your infrastructure coverage by convincing large retail chains to install docking or charging stations in their car park. And you can do this by demonstrating that by having this infrastructure, you can bring X% of increased footfall to their stores, or by reducing their carbon impact by X% by reducing the amount of vehicle traffic that uses standard fuel power. Therefore, you create value at either side of the chain. Click forward, please. And clearly, multiple stakeholders need to be engaged at different stages of the value chain. And for your business model to consider the value to each of the most important or influential stakeholders that align with your particular part of the value chain. And there's a few examples here at the bottom, so they're quite varied. Forward, please. So these challenges were identified from the EVs in India project that was managed by Connected Places Catapult. I think the main point here is that each of these challenges creates an opportunity for innovation and value creation. If you can provide innovations that solve one or more of these challenges, if you can do this in a unique and protectful way, then it can unlock value and create a competitive advantage through changes to either the operational strategy or changes to the value proposition in the market. So shown here are some challenges we identified. So they include either improving battery performance, endurance, standardization of how they fit across different vehicles, or it could be enhancing the charging structure, which could be the charging speed, coverage, and the sources of energy, facilitating shared transport schemes, and addressing consumer needs and mindset. So that's things like user experience, safety concerns, range anxiety, and obviously comfort and accessibility. Forward, please. And clearly, in both your value proposition and your business model, it's important to identify the user or user groups for whom you're developing your solution. Furthermore, it's important to consider what products or services your prospective customer are currently using to get a specific job done. So based on some research Connected Places Catapult completed on the Indian micro-mobility market, we identified there was greater willingness for a stay-at-home mum to adopt an EV scooter service because she uses local bus services, and therefore she felt that an EV scooter would be a more convenient solution to her. Whereas some of the other user groups that we spoke to typically use their own petrol scooter and potentially saw less of an advantage switching to an EV scooter based on their kind of current mode of transport. However, all user groups did express a potential to adopt these new modes of electric vehicles if certain concerns could be alleviated, particularly around sort of battery life, the speed of the electric vehicle, and the number of docking locations that they could access conveniently and nearby. And there is a bit of further reading if you want to look into our research. So there's a document now available online, which is called Opportunities for UK SMEs in the Indian electric 2 and 3-wheeler mobility market. So I recommend having a look at that as well. Next slide, please. So as a little bit of a conclusion, the overall market for EV and micromobility is growing, and there have been some high-profile services and operators that have created profit, but there have also been some casualties along the way. So we now have multiple operators achieving profit or either on the way to profit. There are also many cities and countries encouraging alternative forms of green transport through grants, infrastructure, and developing the infrastructure and having permitted highways. However, some of the challenges include shared micromobility can be seen as antisocial and potentially an eyesore, and this has led to sort of bans in some cities and towns. Furthermore, the quality of some of the scooters or bikes often aren't matched to their environmental or use case, and it can lead to cost for the operators and frustration for users. Click forward, please. But finally, I wanted to leave you with one of the examples that caught my eye recently, and this is that of Forest e-bikes. So Forest are now the second biggest shared bike fleet in London. They have a simple but effective value proposition. So each bike can carry 2 people or 1 person plus some cargo. And this simple addition is easy to grasp and differentiates them from the otherwise crowded market. In particular, as you see in the picture here, they have a sort of a bike seat on the back. And this now allows them to open up their market to whole new user groups such as parents without losing their existing market. So it's identified a kind of gap in the market for sort of user groups that weren't previously serviced by the existing competition and developed a simple solution for that. And that concludes my part of the presentation. So I'd now like to hand over to Neil Chudley.
Hi, Neil. Hi, all. Thanks very much for that, Neil. Yeah, as mentioned, my name's Neil Chudley. I'm the team lead of the business modelling here at Connected Places Catapult. So I just want to take sort of like the next 20 minutes or so just to run through a couple of the tools that we would use and you can use to kind of develop what a value proposition is and what a business model canvas is as well, to help you kind of get a feel for some of the things and ways forward. So we can move on. So the first question then is, what is a value proposition? And I will say value propositions and business models are kind of those terms that get used indiscriminately by a bunch of people. So very much here, we're bringing this back to like the business model canvases kind of used and value proposition canvas used by Strategy. So a value proposition, it's a sum of the benefits that the organization promises to deliver to its customers. So basically, it's the jobs to be done, whether it's through physical offerings, whether it's through kind of services, or whether it's through a combination of both. And the important thing here is for which customers are willing to pay for. So we can move on to the next slide. And I think this is probably one of the most important slides in the whole section, because it kind of defines what a value proposition is. And you don't have a value proposition unless all of this is true. So your total cost of the product or service that you're offering holistically must be less than the price that you're charging your customers after discounts to receive that good. That in turn must be less than the value that the customer puts on your products and services to help them deliver the goals. So to think about this, this is the whole value chain. Value for the customer comes at a lesser price for the customer than they think it is, but that price is greater than the cost of you to deliver that services. And as Neil was mentioned, that's not always been the case. So we can move on. Thank you. So this slide, and we're going to spend a few minutes on this slide just going around it. It just kind of really shows how we bring those things together and how we start to understand them. So on the we'll start on the right-hand side, on the customer segment side, this is understanding who your customer segments are. And you really need to go through it for each of the customer segments, because as we had in the previous slides, each pen portrait, each customer has a slightly different need. Now, obviously, you need to group them up. You need to think about what that segmentation is and find common features within that to make sure you get the widest appeal. But if we go through it very quickly, it's made up of 3 parts. It's got the customer jobs to be done, and this is what the customer wants to achieve, or the steps to helping the customer achieve those things. And there's a bunch of questions that you need to ask yourself to get around this, because understanding the customer is what unlocks value for your business. And it's kind of like, what is it basically that your customer could not live without achieving or accomplishing through using your product? That's the main thing. So what's the stepping stones for that? And what are the different contexts in which they might need to achieve that? Next, you need to ask yourself, okay, well, how does these jobs help them achieve those goals and get to the different state of success within the different contexts? You need to answer that question. And finally, you need to go understand, why does your customer need to achieve this? That's really important. So what is the need for them to achieve, and why do they need to achieve it? Because that is what will create value for the customer. And we kind of split this up into 2 areas. So if we have a look at the most obvious one, pains and gains, the most obvious one is the gains. So here, what you want to be doing, what you want to be writing down, what you want to be thinking about is, what is it you know are the outcomes and benefits that your customer really, really values? Those gains could be functional gains, it could be utility gains, it could be social gains, it might be positive emotions, it might be reputation, it might be cost savings, or savings in time, or savings in effort. So that's the positive side. That's what you really want to understand in terms of what do they get out of it, why do they want to use it. The flip side is that everybody will have some pains. Now, those pains, I tend to think of those pains as being a lot more emotional. So I tend to think about the gains being very functional wins. The pains are those annoyances that get in the way of them using your product. Is it the fact that, there's some bad outcomes, or there's a reputation from other suppliers that need to be overtaken on that one? And I think here, what you've got to do is you've got to think about some of the questions that you ask yourself. So what would your customers consider to be too expensive? What makes your customers feel really, really bad? Or, are there current value propositions that they're using out there that do not fill the goal and which you're looking to compete against? So I think that's what we want to hear. That's what you want to write down. That's what you want to look at. And like I say, you want to have a think about that in terms of the customer segments. Going over to the other side, this is where it's the product or the services need to be designed to think about meeting those. So obviously, you'll notice there's a match. We have gain creators, we have pain relievers. So you kind of guessed it. The object here is in gain creators, it's to outline products and services or features that hit those needs and benefits and outcomes that the customer wants. List those out, get those down there. The flip side of that are the pain relievers. How do you make sure that the negative side of their experience is ameliorated by what you can offer? And that might be through actually improving services. It might be through kind of adding things to it. And I think here you're kind of sort of saying, does the product or service that I'm offering, does it give the savings that I'm promising? Does it feel better? Or does it kind of fit your needs or the customer's needs better than the existing solutions? And then finally, what you end up there is products and services. So you end up with this mirror that can be folded up on itself, where the gains that you've identified, the pains you've identified, and the jobs to be done for the customer is met by your value proposition. Can I have the next slide, please? As mentioned, a lot of this is understanding exactly what sits behind the need for the customer. So here we just put 3 questions here, and we've kind of started to think through kind of some of the stuff you want to go through when you're putting yourself together. So it's the basic stuff. What's the product scope and uses? What are the key features? Who's it aimed at? Where are they? And does it solve their needs? Is it solving their problem? And how significant is the problem? Is it something that the customer's really, really focused on? Or is it something that's a little bit kind of waylaid? So if you look at utility supply compared to, say, Netflix, you can see the engagement that the customer will have with it, and therefore the time thoughts you need to put into the gains and gains. So for the value proposition, what you're thinking about here is, what's the best message? What's the best feeling that we want to put forward to those customers? How do we take those steps that we've got above, who the product's for, what's the scope, where are they? How do we put those questions in such a way that it can be communicated to the customer and, helps address their desired outcomes. Ideally, as Neil was saying earlier, at a level above the competition, so it's better, or at a price point below the competition, so it's cheaper. And that's likely to give you some sort of sustainability. Next slide, please. Which basically gives you 3 questions you need to go through and answer yourself to make sure that your value proposition is viable and will stick. First one, identify your target markets. Who are your best targets for your solution? How do you reach them? The next one actually is those targets, those customers don't necessarily, particularly in the EV environment, sit within your total remit. So you need to think and understand about the key customers, the key stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? How can your value proposition potentially give benefits for them or release some of their pain points? So with the EVs and the whole debate about micromobility, it's the idea that maybe it could clear some congestion, it could make roads and cities safer, etc., or it could also help decarbonisation. So there's a bunch of stakeholders there which you need to involve within your value proposition. And therefore, the third bit, slightly outside, is you need to understand what your stakeholder outcomes are. What is a good success for them to want your value proposition serving customers? Next slide, please. So the value proposition canvas gives you a very pictorial way of looking at this. What we've got here is a little exercise, which I think is in the Miro board as well. And for you to think about, you need to be able to decide or communicate your value proposition really simply. I think there's the 8-year-old test. So does an 8-year-old understand what you're trying to do? And the purpose of this is to try and do it. So our product and service helps X customer who want to achieve something. We do this by X, Y, Z, and adding in features like compatibility. However, we are better than X, Y, Z. So I'm not going to say sort of put an example here. I think we've got an example later on that we'll go through. But basically, this should be your condensed value proposition, and everything should stem from that. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So now we're going to have a little look at the business model canvas. You're saying value proposition and business model canvas. How does it all fit? You might have done this stuff before. Does it all relate? Isn't it just confusion? Well, not really. If you've got your value proposition, that's what your customer want. If we go back to that original kind of equation that we got where, your cost of it needs to be less than the price that you're charging for it, which needs to be less than the value the customer gets to it. The business model is what goes round the outside. This is what enables you to kind of bring that to your customers at a price that ideally makes your enterprise sustainable. And the canvas is really just a way of showing that in one place. Its intention is to kind of be used to either design products, organizations rather, or to tweak organizations. And it's there to help you think about how you increase competitivity through either functions or services or partners, and also how you carve out and keep a unique market position. So we go on to the next slide. Great. So I'm sure you've all seen this before, but I think we'll just run through it very, very briefly, an idea of what should go into each and what some of the considerations would be. So the value, the business model canvas kind of has 9 key elements that pictorially show what your business should be and where it should be doing. We're going to start off right in the middle. Right in the middle sits your value proposition. So everything that sits around the outside should feed into or derive or be supported by elements that sits outside that value proposition square. So that's where you put in who it is, what's the price point, who are your customer segments. Going off onto your right here, we've got the 3 areas which sort of define the desirability. So, who is this for? What's the customer segments? Who are they? What's the size of them? What do they want? That needs to be marked down and jotted there. Next, you come to channels. So how are you going to reach them? It's fine having a market, but if you can't talk to it, there's no point. So you need to think about those channels and the regularity of those channels, the access to those channels, whether somebody else owns those channels, and you need to be able to think about getting in there, and also whether you need to think about paying for those channels or whether they are free. And finally, you come up in this section to customer relationships. So what is it that your customer wants to do when interacting with you. How are they doing this? Is it purely remote? Is it self-service? Is it account managed? Do they get regular kind of documentation? Do they have advice as well as the service? You've got to think about what those relationships are to secure it. Because obviously, you know, remember, a brand isn't just a pretty logo. It's a bunch of stuff that goes around that one. So that sits there very much in desirability. If you've got that right, that's your customer, and that's what you're thinking about. That's what's going to drive your kind of business. And if we flip over to the purple side, on the left-hand side, we've got 3 areas here, which are really talking about what's the feasibility of your offer. So the first bit here is, you know, thinking about what are the key partnerships. It's highly unlikely that you're going to be able to deliver your offer completely and utterly without any help from outside. So what are the partnerships? Those partnerships might be internal, or very much with the EV and the hire. There might be a bunch of external partnerships that you need to think about cultivating and keeping going there. So what are those partnerships? Where do they fit in there? What are the key activities that you need to be doing with those partners, and how does it work? And then you come down to the nitty-gritty in terms of what are the key resources. So this could be in terms of systems, it could be in terms of marketing, it could be in terms of anything, but those resources need to be driven by your revenue streams at some point. So you start to see the connections coming in here, and all those key resources need to be there and focused on your value proposition. They can't just be there for the sake of it. They need to be really important and embedded within that value proposition. So you need to think about what they are, who are they, how do you access them, what sort of terms do you access them on, and then we have finally the key activities. So what is it you need to do to deliver your value proposition? What is it you need to do to make sure those revenue streams stay live, keep those channels active, and keep those customer relationships going? All those things, the partners, the activities, and the resources, if you don't have them, or you don't have them in the enough of a density or to a sufficient quality, then your business model is at risk. And that's the feasibility element of it. And finally, we come to the bit at the bottom, which is, broadly speaking, the cash bit. So you're going to have ins and you're going to have outs. The outs is very much as a cost structure, and you've got to be considering everything here within within your offering, within your kind of systems you need to support it, within your staff costs that need to be supported, and you need to think about how they can be scaling. Particularly at a startup, you know, you need to think about what is my cost structure? How do I keep that under control to ensure that I've got enough of a runway so my project can actually take off. And finally, there's your revenue stream. So the most obvious here is what's the customer paying you for it, but you might actually have other revenue streams which are attached to parts of your business model. It could be data, it could be kind of providing AIPs in certain circumstances. It could be even through providing a vehicle for advertising. So you need to think about what some of those revenue streams would be. Other things might be in there sort of like at the start of your journey, so things like grants, and you might think that your revenue streams might be impacted by the need to incentivize your project through things like discounts. So you need to consider all that to support the activity of the value proposition and delivering the offer. Okay, if I can go on to the next slide, please. So as I said, kind of linked on it, you know, this is your business model, and now you need to think about testing it. And we've got a couple of slides here just sort of saying how you test it, where you would go with testing it, and what you can do with testing it. So as we mentioned, going through it, there are kind of 3 phases. You know, is it feasible? Can you put it together? Can you put all the elements together that you need to? Is it desirable? You know, is it actually something customers want? Are the customer segments kind of going to be coming to you in the way that you expect and need them to? And that leads down to the viable to the last bit, which is the viability of it. So this is where your risk comes in. This is where you need to think about your costs and your revenue, and you need to hold those all together. And broadly speaking, this business model, or any business model you put together, needs to go through these tests on a fairly regular basis because it's a living document. If we go over to the next slide, please. And this is kind of how we would think about testing. So over on your left, you've got your business model. You've got those little kind of exclamation marks. Each one of those exclamation marks would be a statement about your business that you've put down in there. And now you need to think about, how do we actually prove that? How do we actually test those hypotheses? So you need to develop those hypotheses out. So for each exclamation mark, each statement, you need to understand what your belief in that is. How certain is it that you need to do that? Give it a score. Then we need to sort of say, how do you verify it? Is that actually true? Do you have the data behind it that backs it up? Then there's another one is, can you measure it? Can you make sure that remains the same? What is the value that you can put on that? And again, simple 1 to 5 scoring might be do it. And we are right if. So the we are right if is if all those things right, it adds up. And that will give you a view of a scoring card. Now you can develop your own scoring card, but these are the basic elements that you probably want on it. Do we have the data? Is it believable? And how important is it within our business model? And finally, you can therefore go on and plot those things, and you end up with a neat little 4x4, which basically sort of says, if it's unimportant to some extent, you don't have to worry about it. If your statements, however, kind of sit up there and start to ask questions, then you'll have two areas to go down. If it sits up there and it seems like it's a really important kind of statement or a hypothesis, but you're not sure you got the data, the onus is to go and find those data and do that refresh. If, on the other hand, you don't think you can find that data, or you look for it, there's a need potentially to experiment in the market to make sure that that is true. So that all makes sense. And I think that's a really important thing. A business model is not just something you write down and ignore. It's something you write down, you test, and you visit it. Okay, next slide, please. So how to use it? As I said, think of it as a living document. This should sit there with your value proposition, the business model, and arguably, we don't talk about it here, but you should also be thinking about what your marketing mix is, the classic Porter's 7 Ps. How do people seeing it? How are you taking it to market? You need to use that to sort of make, as I said on the previous slide, generate those hypotheses and also think about how do you test those hypotheses. So yes, you can test it internally. I would argue that a better way to do it is to go out there, talk about it, solicit feedback, and ask questions of your customers, of your partners, of potentially other areas in the industry who might be able to have that discussion with you. What to avoid? Well, like I say, it's just because you've got a neat business model doesn't mean to say that you've got a neat business. So you need to be really honest with yourself about what you're seeing there and really honest that it's actually working. So it can be misleading. It can be simplistic. It is not an end in itself. It's a discussion tool. It's a strategy setting tool. It's a guidance. It's a light that you need to use rather than it being the be all end all. It doesn't always capture all of the market dynamics, and we'll come on to that either and talk about that briefly. So you need to think about some of those competition and environmental factors and making sure that they are being, how should I put it, they are being handled sensitively within your value proposition and within your business model. And it's not particularly agile friendly. You can't really do it in stages. It's a big picture thing. You can't really break it down. You need to have a look at everything at once. But as a tool for innovation, you can do it quickly. You can do multiple versions, and I think that works really well. It's like the weather forecast. You've got these great computers showing out hundreds and thousands of versions of what the weather could be, and the most prominent ones stick. You can do the same. You can sit in a group and come up with half a dozen of these in a couple of hours, and then play around with them. It's highly shareable. As you can see, we've gone through it quite quickly. People get the grip of it really, really quickly and understandable, and therefore, because it's so shareable and so quick, it's really testable. You can go through and test those ideas, which, as mentioned, is probably the most important thing for you to be thinking about doing in that space. Moving on to the next slide. So the next slide really is we talked about kind of, what are the bits that's missing? And the bits that's missing actually is that your business exists in a broader stream, a more macro world. And you need to be understanding what those are, because they could offer you opportunities, and more likely they could offer you threats. And we kind of broadly, you can expand this out further by looking at sort of like four forces, and it comes from that kind of idea. But basically, think about when you're testing your business model, what could impact it? What's the winds of change that would erode it? What's the wave that could wash over it? And there's 4 main areas to think about here. So what are the key trends? Technology changes all the time. Regulations can change. Attitudes can change. Socio-economic trends can change. So keep an eye on those and think about how your business model might need to adapt to those. Think of Paris. Think of the way that some of the areas have banned kind of EVs in this area. So it shows the vulnerability of all products, particularly kind of emerging ones, to some of the key changes that could be out there. The other thing is kind of market forces. So, you know, are there issues with the market? Are there issues with the supply or the regulation or the reputation of it? So, you know, think about the crashes, think about the negative press that we've had about private scooters, perhaps in this space. Needs and demand switch as alternatives come in. Customers also have this annoying habit of being stuck to the things that they like, and they would experience the idea that there is a cost to switching. So understand what those switching costs are and think about how you ameliorate those or reduce those as you're going through potentially some of the pain relievers within your value proposition that can be supported by a business model. And revenue attractiveness. So, you know, is your revenue coming from the most attractive areas of your business? Do you need to think about pivoting? Over on the other side, we've got market force on one side, we've got industry forces on the other side. So what are your competitors doing? How are they trying to undermine you? What are what newcomers doing to the market? How could they disrupt your business model? Does it look very like you've disrupted somebody else's? Hopefully, are they going to disrupt yours? Substitutes, as we mentioned, linked to switching costs. There's always going to be alternatives, right? People are going to walk away from things. If TfL suddenly cut all their prices, then you probably see an uplift of people using the tube as opposed to some of these other things, for example. And stakeholders can change, as can suppliers and value chain actors. Not suggesting that value chain actors change very quickly, but hey, look at Trump. So macroeconomic forces is the last one. People's ability to access these and markets' abilities to support you change and flip around all the time. So you need to be cognizant of those and make sure that you can consider what some of your alternatives might be and how you might think about mitigating against some of the issues that you have in that space, should they occur. Moving back briefly then, that's great. So what you need to do at all stages is consider what environment your business and your customers are working in, and think about how it plays on your value proposition, and think about how that plays out on your business model more broadly. So next slide, please. So just going into the close, obviously two very different tools, very different approaches to think about how you're filling them in. And I just wanted to just run through what they are and when to use them. So business model canvas, it's that holistic view of your business, and it understands how your business creates and captures value for you and your customer. And if you have that right, that should start to unlock the sustainability. The proposition canvas zooms in. It's what your customers want. Who are your customer segments? How do you meet their needs? Who else is meeting their needs, more importantly? And can you come up with enough gains and positive outcomes to drive them towards what you'll think your product set and services would be? Final slide. Can I go to the next slide, please? Thank you very much. So starting a business, as I'm sure you're aware, or even running a business, is a risky and volatile at times proposition. So I think it's worthwhile thinking about why the business model and the value proposition are so important. And here's a list of reasons from CB Insights about why businesses fail. And actually, you know, a bit sobering, and I apologize to end on a bit of a down note, but a lot of these actually start to relate to things that you need to be watching and you can track through your business model. So market needs, outcompeted, flawed model, regulatory challenges, price issues, poor product, this or even some of the elements about, you know, that your pivots aren't working around the kind of your beliefs you have for grain revenue. So bear this in mind. Always think about your value proposition meeting the customer's needs and your business model driving your sustainability, and think about what the threats are, both internally, externally, and think about how you mitigate those to keep going and keep sustainable and keep profitable. I hope that helped. I think that's me done. I'm now handing over to Elise for the discussion section.
Thank you, Neil. Hi, everyone. My name is Alize McClurg. I'm a social research specialist at the Catapult and will facilitate a discussion. I am going to ask everybody, if you're in a position to do so, to turn on your cameras and give a bit of an introduction. Before we do that, though, I just wanted to check and see if anybody had questions on any of the material that Neil presented. No? We're all happy? Okay, well, if questions come up, yep. Yes, please.
Thank you, Anil and Neil Chudley. It was really nice of you to take through business value canvas model, and so just a question on when we are trying to approach clients, which in our case is predominantly public sector entities, just and then for them the main client is their residents. How we can incorporate these models into the discussions that we are having with them.
I'm going to start off. I mean, you might find that this is not the ideal models to share with them. They're more for you to think about how you can create your model and create your messaging and create your servicing. But I would say that they are both imminently usable, particularly the value proposition. So as I sort of said, if you think about sort of micro mobility, you've got your end customer, which is the person potentially driving the vehicle. You've got a whole range of stakeholders who sit around there. You've got like local authorities, you've got some of the infrastructure management, you've got traffic management, etc. Those guys. I think what you need to do in that case is, the value proposition canvas needs to be done for each segment and also each stakeholder. So run through it, think about what the jobs they are doing, think about how they interact, think about what that web of relationships is, and try to think about how your product or service can answer some of their jobs to be done, the pains, but most importantly, particularly if you look at stakeholders, and particularly if you're looking at institutional stakeholders, they're probably looking for why they can say no. So what you need to think about is what are the pains that are being caused to them, and how can your proposition help fit those games? And again, same things apply. You need to be really on to what drives them. If it's about local authorities, what is their priority? Are they concerned with congestion? Are they concerned with net zero? Are they concerned with other things like planning permission and getting kind of retail sites up and running? Understanding that and putting that into a value proposition which sits as one of the segments or one of the stakeholders in a library of propositions that talk about your products and services will help you get your heads around it. You can distill it down. I think the most user-friendly thing I would say within that is that value proposition statement. If you can turn that into something which everybody can understand and clearly outlines the value of your product over and above some of the alternatives, then you can start including that in your pitch decks, in your discussions with your competitors. Business model, I say you can use it. You can think about using it, but I would say you want to be making sure that you have a very good relationship with the stakeholders that you're sharing that with. So you need to make sure that trust is there, so you can go through and discuss what the alternatives are. And I would say that if you're in ability to co-create things, so if you're at the start of a business venture, then actually using the business model and going through that discussion with your partners would be very, very useful. However, you need to be aware of promises. What you can't do, I don't think, is going with a business model which is set and rigid and say, this is how we work and that's it. Does that help?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Neil. Quite useful.
Thanks, Neil. Florencio, I saw that you went off mute. Did you have any question that you wanted to ask?
Yes, can you hear?
Yes.
Fantastic. So in my case, I'm not yet registered within the cohort, so I want to understand a bit how does it work. On the other hand, is the group or the CPC is also working off accelerator in helping starting I would say an overhaul of a business model to be a product and a service to adapt to the Indian market, because there are many radicals on the project and the product service I can bring that will be very suitable. But of course, I need to overhaul, understand the client, the sector, how it is working, and have this help. And I think it will be a bomb. It will have an exponential application, but I need to understand all these things and dismantle, break down in pieces what I bring, and then attach all those businesses to what is really happening and the actual local needs. How can this cohort or the accelerator or the team within CPC help on understanding if it is a good fit.
Yes, I can speak to a little bit more about the kind of the program and the approach that we took. So this project has been going on for maybe nearly 2 years now. We did a bit of a rescope kind of last year, and last year in September, some of our team went to Chennai and Kolkata in India, and we did a lot of workshops and meetings with stakeholders there to really understand kind of what are the needs that what are the pains that they're having and the needs that they want UK SMEs to support on. And that was first we brought kind of research, and then we validated that with stakeholders. And those were the 4 challenges that Neil Mary presented before. We're now at the point in the program where we've run an open call to select 8 UK SMEs to go to India. And the point of the program now is to facilitate conversations with Indian stakeholders that we have with those 8 UK SMEs, and also to do a visit in March. Alongside that, we have these knowledge sharing activities. So the first one was in January, and that was to give UK and Indian stakeholders an overview of the Kolkata and Chennai stakeholder landscape within EVs and micromobility. This is the second one of our knowledge sharing program, and so this is a business model and value proposition workshop. The reason that we have this as a topic is because it was of great interest to the Indian stakeholders that we engaged with, and we also know that UK SMEs are trying to understand kind of the gaps that need to be filled basically in this space. And then the last one we're having is in March, and that's on gender inclusion. So that's a bit more about the program. I don't know if that answers your question or provides clarity.
A bit. I don't know if I can add something to the question. I have been in contact with Megan Ford for this program, maybe, but there are other programs, maybe Innovate UK around India. So it's a new discovery of India. How are you connected with those elements, and how open is the program a part of the addressed to the cohort you are working with now? If there is a pop-up help I can get if I come, or I have a conversation after reading the books you made, so I have a better approach with your past work, and then once I have this understanding of your findings, is there any avenue also to have a discussion to round up the idea and address how the program could be overhauled towards India?
Yeah, so with the program, you're right, there's a lot of Innovate UK and other Catapult projects that are working in India. It is like a big market that a lot of kind of UK entities are trying to work in, and so we are in connection with them and understanding the types of visits and the types of programs that they're doing. I think if you're looking for like ad hoc support, I will drop the emails of both Neils after this chat, and so you can reach out to them if you have any questions on like the business model canvas or the value proposition work. So yeah, you can feel free to reach out to them on that kind of support, but I think any support that we provide to SMEs outside of the cohort will be mostly in the form of these knowledge sharing activities.
In the format of what? Sorry?
Of these knowledge sharing activities that we're doing. So like the one that we are having today, and then we're having one more in March. But if you have questions about like the material presented today that you think you'd like support on, then you can reach out to either Neil and they can help you.
Thank you, Elise.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Thanks, Kevin, for your chats. Hopefully you're able to put your mic on now, or able to ask questions if you can. Next slide, Kat, please. Thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to just have a bit of an interactive session to discuss kind of the tools that have been presented today, if you've had experiences with them or not. These are kind of guidelines for our session. No worries. Thanks, Anand. Yeah, so these are just guidelines for our sessions. In short, it's just to be respectful of others, and also what you say here we won't share. It'll be confidential. So you can go to the next slide. There's just some discussion prompts. So really for Florencio and Kevin, if your mic is working. If your mic isn't working, Kevin, then maybe we skip the discussion side and we can go to the Miro activity. But I guess maybe I'll just start off with one question and see how it goes. If you could have a magic wand and remove one barrier to growing your business, what would that be? So I'm on question number 2. So up to Florencio or Kevin to start us off. Silence. No.
For the first question, you mean?
Kevin, no, we cannot hear you. At least I'm not able to hear you. And then Florencio, no, I just went to the second question because I like the question. So if you could have a magic wand to remove one barrier to growing your business, what would that be?
Having a partner, also a co-founder that would help me address and cover the gaps I am not the best on, that would have the same entrepreneurial passion as I do to push this forward.
Okay. Thanks for that. Yeah. Why don't we can go to the Miro activity. I'll hand over to Neil now, and he will just give some examples of what we've showed today, but more practically with the business model canvas and the value proposition. And then I can share my screen and take us through the Miro board, which you will all have access to after this, so you can play with it on your own time as well. Cool. Over to you, Neil, and then I will share my screen.
Yeah, we just need to go to the next slide as well, please. So yeah, it's just a well-known example from Strategyzer. So you can see here, this is the completed value proposition canvas. So at the top, importantly, they state who their target customer is, which in this case is an upper middle class male with a certain income threshold. And on your right hand side, you see that these are now kind of filled in with some sort of post-it notes. We'll be getting you to do a similar thing. So if we start down the bottom with the pains, so these are some of the concerns around changing from the existing vehicle to a Tesla. So things like lack of charging stations, fear of a dead battery, requiring frequent charging, and having to buy before the price drops. Some of the sort of pains that a customer looking to buy a Tesla would encounter. Sorry, hi Kevin. Can you? I thought someone was speaking. And then on the other side, you kind of got the gains. So things that would be a kind of a draw to the Tesla. So performing like a sports car was an attribute that we feel like is a sort of value add. High safety ratings, having sufficient seating for themselves and the family, high-end battery, brand recognition, and then there's some jobs, things that it would be kind of a minimum requirement for the Tesla to be able to achieve. So obviously we have to use it to commute to work, have occasional long distance trips. And then you kind of got these small brand recognition, sort of emotional draws. So things like convey success and be different from others. So these are all kind of created on kind of the customer needs, so on either the gains, pains, or the jobs that the customer wants to achieve. And then after you have the what solutions does Tesla present that that provides a solution to some of these identified pains and gains. So, for instance, fear of a dead battery and lack of charging stations, and having a high-end battery as some of the kind of pains and gains. They have 8 years warranty on battery, and you have kind of fast charging as a pain reliever. And then when it comes to design and brand recognition and being different from others, you have sort of high-tech 17-inch touchscreen, very much focused on sort of design and style, and as some of the game creators. So you kind of see that there's some solutions to the pains and gains that are being identified in this example. Yeah, I think that's it. Any questions on this particular one? And then we have a slightly different example for the value proposition statement. So this is an SME we have been working with. So they've developed technology for long life EV batteries. So ones that last longer than the traditional electric vehicle battery. So the proposition statement is our long life EV battery technology helps, and this is a stakeholder that they've identified, maintenance staff of shared scooter operators who want to service scooter fleets more cost effectively by reducing battery degradation by 50% over 2 years and increasing time between services, thus keeping more scooters in operation, unlike current scooter EV batteries. So again, it sort of breaks this value proposition statement down into who it's targeting, what the value is they're creating, and what pains they're relieving. That's next slide. And this is, we won't be doing it in the Miro, but we do provide a template for your business model canvas. And just on the right-hand side here are some useful links that again will be included on the Miro, and we'll also share these slides after this workshop. So you can go click on some of these links and get a bit more kind of guidance about best practices for filling in the business model canvas. And on this Visology link at the bottom, there's some example business model canvases for different sort of either shared micro-mobility service operators or kind of EV businesses. So it's worth looking at those as well.
Thanks, Neil.
That's it.
Kat, I can share my screen now. So what I'll do now is just take us through the Miro link. I've just put it in the chat. So Kevin and Florencio, let me know if you don't have access to it, but I'm hoping that you do. You have access?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, as we've been saying, this will be accessible to you after the call as well. So you can work on it on your own time. What I'll do now is just take you through the Miro board, and if you're not familiar with Miro, I can kind of help you navigate it. And then we'll just stay on the call for like 5 minutes or so to see if you have any questions as you're going through it, but I think we'll wrap up after I show this. So the objective of the activity is really to help you have access to the value proposition canvas and the business model template, and that can be used as homework and just to help you kind of develop your business and think about it further. So on the right-hand side here, I'm just checking everyone can see my screen, right? Cool. Okay. So the examples for guidance, this is the one that Neil just showed. So this is an example that you can go back to and look at as you're filling out your own. And then this field here, which is the yellow space, is where you have an individual board with your name on it, and that's what you can fill out. And then on the bottom here, this is the takeaway tools and templates. So we have a value proposition statement, a business model canvas, and the hypothesis prioritization that you can do at your own time and work on it. So what we'd ask you to, maybe if you have some time now, spend a bit of time doing is looking at this. So the first thing you're going to do is understand your customer. So that's on the right-hand side of the board. First is to name your target customer. So if you want to do that on Miro, you basically click on the sticky note. And then if I were to say, middle-aged man as my target customer, I would put that right here. Then you'll go and fill out the gains, the pains, and the customer jobs, as Neil explained earlier, and provide information about your solution. So the gain creators, products or services, detail your product or service, and then pain relievers. And of course, that should be matching what you've written down in your customer segment. So please feel free to spend a bit of time doing this. As I said, we can be on call for about 5 or 10 minutes or so to answer any questions and to help you through it from the technical aspect of using Miro, as well as any kind of more conversation around how to use the tool. If you wanted to take this off of this board, for example, and wanted to start a new Miro board, what you could do is kind of select all of this and then copy, and then you could start a new Miro board by clicking on Miro and clicking new board, and then you would have like access to that on a private screen outside of this if that's something that you wanted to do. Are there any questions on the Miro activity?
Yes, can you confirm this anything drop there is under an NDA?
This is really more of a tool for you to use. So like we won't go back and look at this, but you know, anyone who's been shared this link has access to it. So I think if you want to fill this out and put in like private information, then I would suggest that what you can do is basically drag and go like this and copy the board onto a new board. So for example, what I would do is go like this, copy. I'm hoping that selected everything. It's working.
You might need to unlock the background.
Yeah, okay,
Copy
thanks.
it.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Can unlock them for you if you.
Thank you. So, Florencia, what I would do is basically go onto here. Actually, before I do that, let me just make a copy of this page. I would click onto Miro. Then what you could do is start a blank board. And so then nobody else would have access to this. And you could fill it out. We'll also send the slides to you. So if you prefer to do this in PowerPoint, you can also do it in PowerPoint. And then you could paste the board and it would load, and then you could fill it out that way. Does that make sense?
It means you won't see it now if I start doing something.
Yeah, if you do your own board, then I won't see it.
Okay, but or I can do it after the event.
Yes, you could do it after the event, but everyone, if you still do it on the link that we've shared with you, then anyone who's been shared that link will have access to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Kevin, let me see if you've written anything in the chat, if you're all good. Or if we can hear you. I still can't hear you, Kevin, sorry. Okay, a thumbs up. Cool. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. What I'll do now is just do a wrap up. And as I said, we are here to help you for the next 5 or 10 minutes if you would like. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. We appreciate your time and you being here. So this is part of the knowledge sharing, or the EVs in India project. And so I've just sent a chat with a link for more information about the project that you can find out about. We also published a report which is about the opportunities for UK SMEs in the Indian market. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that. And I've also included both Neil's emails, so you can reach out to them if you have any questions about the material presented today. And lastly, we'd really appreciate you filling out the survey form. We are doing more of these knowledge sharing activities, and so we really want to know kind of what we did well and how we can do them better. And with that, we can wrap up. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Let's be in contact.
Okay, thanks, Valencio.